Chapter 8 Reassignment. It was all a mistake, you see. I adopted a dream that wasn't mine, forced upon me with a promise. The reward for that promise was so great, I didn't care about the risk, however high that might be. That dream was to attain a world without war, and for a time I succeeded. I suppose they kept their promise to me that I wouldn't have to do any of it again. I was such an idealistic fool to believe them. Sarah McCurdy sat on the plane as it soared through the air. The flight departed early in the morning. The vast majority of the passengers on the plane slept with night masks hanging over their face or with their caps tipped down over their eyes. The flight attendants were disinterested in the passengers, hanging out in their little cubby area. Some of them were on their phones when they thought no one was watching them. She leaned back in her chair with her hands over her chest, looking out at the black sky, the darkness. She knew it all too well. She knew the night welcomed the Threckets, and when darkness came, so did they. For whatever reason, nothing significant ever happened during the day, as if darkness can't survive in the light. But then again, can light survive in the dark? Feeling her phone vibrate in her pocket, she opened it, seeing a notification of an email coming directly from Administrator Colton. She closed the screen and returned the phone back into her pocket, and pulled out her laptop from her carry-on, turning on the laptop to access her email. The email sent to her had multiple attachments, and this was a special email address exclusive to the Castor administration. This email read, Major Sarah McCurdy, as per our discussion, you are to perform a certain task in London. These attachments are to be forwarded to Administrator Sander for reassignment. You start immediately. There is only one reason and only one goal. Failure will mean further influence from the outside, and we cannot allow that for obvious reasons. Also, if you can manage to track down whoever it was at Dyatlov's Pass and find out what their real goal was. Like I said, odds are they are working against the administration, but they must be affiliated with an administrative branch and not the American one. However, even if he was affiliated with ours, we don't get too many casters from Georgia, like you suggested. Regards, Admin Colton. She hesitated in opening the attachments. Forwarded to Administrator Sander for reassignment, she whispered to herself. Releasing a deep sigh, she rested her chin upon her palm. Colton, what exactly are we doing here? If the UK administration branch finds out, when they find out it was an American who stole the Grail, they will hunt you relentlessly. Just what exactly are you planning? I don't exactly trust the UK branch to do the right thing. Don't make me regret this, Colton. Finally, she opened the attachments. Just her name and complete file with the American branch of the administration. She immediately forwarded the attachments to the email provided and shut the laptop off, putting it back into her bag. Adams's face came into her mind, his blood seeping out of his mouth as his life left his eyes. Her hand trembled in her seat. She felt like there was an anaconda in her chest, wrapping its way around her lungs, forcing her air out. She hid her trembling hand in her pocket. Her free hand clutched her chest. She breathed heavily. Adams, why didn't you stay there to help? I didn't want to have to murder you. She opened her trembling hand and closed it onto a fist. She repeated this several times until the trembling stopped and looked out the window. That damned code. Don't they understand? A little part of us dies when we enforce that code. Silence, it's called. Absolute silence, and then erase the bodies as if they were never there. It's sickening. They're people, not just some mere pawns in a game of chess. It's sick. She kept her bags with her inside the taxi as she departed. She noticed the people seemingly cheery, as they always are, ignorant of the hell that roams the streets at night. The rain was light with greying clouds above, emptying the heavens with dismal tears of the lives lost, especially Adam's. Heaven wept for even someone like him, someone so insignificant. The taxi dropped her off on Newman Street. The building before her was large and had numerous windows with bright chandeliers that could be seen from the outside. She walked up the large marble steps and opened the door. She carefully stepped inside, wiping off her shoes before she entered, walking on the beautiful green carpet which looked much like a bed of majestic grass. There were many men and women about, talking with one another with pleasant tones, and seemed much more relaxed than they ever were in the American branch. Many of them wore some semblance of a cloak, while others more casual attire. She walked up to the receptionist, carefully placing her bags on the floor. She leaned over the desk as the receptionist hung up the phone politely. Name? Sarah McCurdy, American branch. I'm being reassigned to the UK division, she answered. The receptionist giggled. Okay. The man behind her laughed at her. The UK division? The UK doesn't have a division. Nope, nope, nope. This is Camelot, little lady, the heart of it all. I think you Yanks ought to have known that by now. Well, that was humiliating. She clenched her fist at her side, not appreciating the casual haze at her expense. One American transitioning to Camelot, the receptionist said with a jeer. Her name tag read Lois. ID? Sure. She pulled out her purple Castor ID. To the eye of a normie, the card was just as mundane as any business card. To another Castor, the spell that bewitched it revealed everything about her. Her ID number, address, name, aliases. The card afforded no privacy. Here to see Administrator Sander for reassignment. One moment. She dialed an 8-digit extension. Sander, I have a Sarah McCurdy from the American branch who is transferring to Camelot. Okay, right away, sir. She turned back to Sarah. Follow those halls, she said, pointing down a long corridor where the carpet turned from green to blue. The corridor was wide and had several paintings of historic figures hanging on the walls. You're going to take a right at the end of the corridor and then a left. The door is locked, so you're going to have to knock. Understood, she said coldly. She picked up the bags and, about-faced, marched through the room to get to the corridor. She could hear the snickering of laughing Brits from behind her. She ignored them as she entered the corridor and admired the paintings of the historic figures. She loved some of the old histories of the legends, which were greatly exaggerated to hide the actual truth behind those myths. She made it to the end of the hall, where a giant portrait of the founder of the Castor administration was. It was he who founded this administration, and it was he who put the oppressive codes in place. King Arthur, Raiser of Camelot, founder of the Castor administration. For many, he was deemed to be a hero, fusing the box of Pandora to the Holy Grail, forever limiting the cosmic rifts connecting hell and earth. But to others, like to Sarah, a symbol for oppression in a Castor's world she had no stake in. In this portrait she gazed upon the scenery, wrought with war and corpses slain by King Arthur himself, and in his left hand was a depiction of the Holy Grail with divine light emitting from its entrance, filled with crystalline water, and behind him, filled with all its curses, was the box of Pandora, and it had been opened, never closed. She passed on, continuing to follow the directions of the receptionist until she eventually came to that door. The door was wood and plain. Upon the front of the door were numerous engravings that, no doubt, imbued the door for it to last. These engravings were outdated, written in Anglo-Saxon, and this was the creed penned by King Arthur. Translated into modern English, it read, I solemnly swear, as a Castor of the administration, to uphold absolute secrecy, for the secrets of the world is not ready for the common person. This I swear, as a knight of this round table, to slay all demons who come crawling out from hell. This I swear for life, and at the cost of it. She knocked on the door with a heavy hand. She waited, still holding both of her bags at her side. The door swung open, inward. There was a handsome man behind a desk, tall and physically large, much like a marine. His hair was neatly combed, and it shined through the light. She looked at him as he was penning some paperwork. Right behind him was a woman standing smugly behind him, leaning against the back wall, her arms disrespectfully crossing her chest. Come in, he said. She walked through the threshold. He tilted his head up with a smile. Make sure to close the door. McCurdy closed the door. She heard the locks and gears turning inside the door from unwanted ears and eyes from the outside. She didn't prompt the door to lock. She walked over to the chair, sitting down as directed. Welcome to Camelot, Sander said. Well, we're much different from you people down at the American branch. As you can probably tell, we can be relaxed, but don't let that fool you. We can hold our own just fine here, especially at the epicenter of Pandora. So, tell me about this previous incident up in Djatlov's Pass. It seems highly unusual, but that is usual for us. Yes, Sander, she began. Here we don't use last names. I understand you're accustomed to that, not here. Too formal. Here I am Adam. If you want to be formal, just call me Administrator. This is Bridget. You're Sarah, said Adam. Adam. Sarah started again before recounting all the data she had regarding Devil's Pass. Two possibilities. Either he's not one of us, or he is. If he's one of us, he must have gone rogue and is just saying that to throw you off on the real reason he was there. We all know where the Grail is, so there would be no excuse for him to go looking for it there. Trying to get his hands on it is another matter entirely. If he's not one of us, he is probably the husk of some unfortunate soul who now must be put down because he was possessed by a threcket from Pandora. He could be an idiot too, that's also a possibility. Anything else? Bridget said. He did talk to me as if he wasn't one of us, she admitted. I may have left that out. Yes, well then he's probably possessed. Sucks for him now, doesn't it? Bridget said. Yes, well, Sarah, it isn't like you had a full team at your disposal to actually get information on the subject, and yet we have nothing. We just simply have to wait for him to appear again, whenever and wherever that might be, said Sanders. But if he appears again, it could be, Sarah objected. Catastrophic, I know, but we don't have enough information, so if he ends up leveling an entire city with these creatures, that should be big enough to gather information, Sandra replied. Besides, there isn't enough information to go hunting on. So you will sacrifice an entire city of people for him to show up again? You can't be serious. You heartless bastards. Sarah. The look Bridget gave was uncannily similar to that which a mother gives her small child when they draw all over the kitchen table. You really have no one to blame but yourself for this. You have nothing for us to go on. You've given a location, that's it. He isn't going to be returning there, that's a fool's move. You really gave us no choice but to wait. So if you have a problem with it, you can blame yourself for what is to come. It's as simple as that. I couldn't have stopped him alone, most likely. However, I could at least have gathered enough information for us to look into it. We have nothing. If you want to place blame on the administration for allowing an entire city to die, well, blame yourself for not gathering enough intel for us to start a global manhunt. The blame isn't entirely on you. The American branch should have sent someone out there last minute before they decided to send you up there. I don't know what they were thinking. He scratched his forehead. McCurdy was beside herself, not knowing how to engage in the irony of the power dynamic between Bridget and Sander. Sander was the lead administrator of all the branches, and Bridget, not sure what her status was undoubtedly lower, yet she carried with her the confidence of an administrator. Bridget, why don't you show her around? She must be tired. After all, it is going to be a long night. Understood, Administrator. Bridget's tone turned cheery. Well, let us be off then. I need to get my tea. Sarah was put off by Bridget's code switching. She couldn't trust someone who could cool down from a sharp attack to be a cheery guide with a few short exchanges. The locking mechanisms released and the door slowly swung open. Sarah grabbed her bags immediately as she stood up, walking right behind Bridget. She understood her as a respectfully harsh woman, but one that didn't have a bad figure from behind, much too tempting and equally dangerous. So, when did you find out about your reassignment? Bridget asked her. Immediately after Dyatlov, she answered. It was unexpected, but my administrator was quick to find a replacement. Americans, quick to act when it doesn't matter, but when any important decision is to be made, it seems like the entire world is filled with naught but red tape. Seriously, it is easier getting a corpse to move around. McCurdy remembered something, that some researching caster, she couldn't remember his name, was trying to do some research into necromancy. She was curious about the research that went into it, and she knew, just like elemental magic, it was a forbidden craft. Well, that isn't exactly the best explanation. More like a caster was insane if they so much as entertained the idea. A necromancy experiment had a failure rate of over 99%. A failed attempt would mean either the death of the one casting the ritual and destruction and contamination of existing materials for the ritual, or opening a portal into Pandora, allowing the caster in a weakened state to be possessed by a threcket coming out of Pandora. However, with the rumour of someone wanting to do research on the matter, she was curious. Bridget, did anything ever happen with the research into necromancy? McCurdy asked. Bridget gave her a curious stare. Oh, we never funded that research, nor are we going to. What on earth would we use it for? Besides, the person who was going to do research into it was given an ultimatum. He could do the research, but he wouldn't be with his unit anymore because of numerous conflicts involved with it. Trust me, it is for the best no one messes around with it, Bridget sighed. Besides, only King Arthur ever succeeded in doing that. Same reason why no one researches elemental magic. While being able to use the elements as tools would push us leagues above those nasty little threckets, it's risky because it's almost impossible to control. Honestly, if someone wanted to do research into making that kind of magic usable, those resources would be better spent. Well, that answers that. But she knew Bridget was right. The risk far outweighed the reward and shouldn't be entertained, except in the need to rattle someone. Bridget walked her into the main lobby with a tea kettle. She filled the kettle with water, flicking it onto a boil. She poured some milk in, hanging the tea bag on the inside of the cup. The kettle beeped, and the light turned off on the side. She poured the boiling water into the mug, stirring some sugar in before discarding the tea bag in the trash can. Taking a sip, she inhaled the sweet, fragrant aroma. Turning to McCurdy, You want some? I wouldn't mind. Help yourself, Bridget said, reluctantly turning away from the boiling kettle. By the way, there are no biscuits. Sarah made herself a cup of tea in the same fashion. Okay, on to the tour, if you really want to call it that is all. You're not going to want to carry those all day. Let us get you to your quarters. Sarah followed her with her bags at her right and the teacup in her left hand, sipping the tea. It was okay, and something about it soothed her. Maybe I should stop drinking coffee. She followed her to the back of the main building and through some large doors. Bridget was a talker, and she never stopped walking. Sarah half assumed Bridget would have kept talking through the sips of her tea had it not been delicious. On the way she noticed some elevators. Some went up, but there were those elevators that only went down. These elevators were closer to the archives, which seemed impressive on the outside, a likely hiding place for the Grail and other artifacts. Bridget took her through a large room and pulled out her ID card, swiping it on the solid black console at the side. Sarah was amazed as she walked through the threshold of the room, at the pristine condition of the floors, cleaner than glass. The standard of cleanliness was much higher than any other barracks she had ever been in. The room was filled with numerous beds, some unoccupied, others had some sleeping or studying casters here. Let's get you a bed now. We wouldn't want your precious belongings being stolen now, would we? I'm staying here. Sarah wasn't quite sure what to expect, but she figured there might be a little more privacy. Not much, but not in an open space with numerous triple bunks. Yes, I don't care if it's satisfactory or not. Yes, you sleep here, you live here, you eat here. You make friends or whatever it is you Americans do. We all do, well, most of us. Even I stay here. She escorted her to a triple bunk. The desk beside it was equally tall and had support on all sides. You get the top, I'm at the bottom. If you say so, she griped, handing Bridget her tea. She climbed at the top of the bunk and lay her bags there. Well, get down now. We have more to see. Come on, I don't have all day, you wanker. That was rude. Sarah rapidly blinked her eyes as she attempted to stare Bridget down. There is something wrong with this woman. Who fucking cares? Just get down here. Sarah climbed back down with haste. You know we're all casters here, right? You could have just jumped down. No one would say anything. Bridget was right. Sarah knew it, just her casting abilities were under lockdown, subconsciously trying to repress it, constantly denying who she was in front of her peers. Her brothers and sisters in arms were never really her own, isolated by her own birth from her own inheritance. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, just lighten up. Sheesh, come on. Off to my favourite place, the archives. Oh, and by the way, you will get your own ID badge at the end of the day. Unfortunately, you're stuck with me until then. We can't just have you go off all willy-nilly and just roam around freely. You'll get stuck somewhere. Yes, ma'am. Bridget led her out of the room, and the door shut behind them. She led her back towards the elevators and opened the door into the archives. The archives were filled with numerous filing cabinets and shelves filled with innumerable books and tomes. They went through the vast dusted-off shelves in the archives, looking at the many impressive monoliths, portraits, paintings, scrolls, tomes, and of course even the carpet was decorated with many archaic, albeit beautiful designs. Whoever funded these archives spared no expense, a price high enough for even a treasury. Sarah saw stairs over to the side. Bridget, she said as she drank the last of her tea. Those stairs, where do they lead? Well, I'm not supposed to acknowledge questions about it, but it should be common knowledge to casters at this point. We keep the Grail there. It's under protection at all costs. Those go down to the vaults, where we keep some sacred artifacts besides the Grail there. It is under lockdown, impossible to get down to the lower levels without a key or capsizing the entire building. Now, just an opportunity. I can frame her if need be.